Hey everybody, welcome back to We Are Podcast. This is The Act Out, Season 1, Episode 7, Miles Francis. If this is your first time checking out the podcast network, please head over to your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, or iTunes, and give We Are Podcast Network a like. And if you get a chance, head over to our social media. All links can be found in the description. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at /We Are Podcast. And with that said, on to the podcast. Hey everybody, welcome to The Act Out. From open mic to the big stage, comedians tell us stories that were made. Today, I have a very special guest. This guy is a friend of mine, first of all, okay? An amazing comedian, frickin' rocks. He's awesome on stage, has one of the best stage personalities you will ever see, period, done. He's got a show coming up on November 30th at 7:30. It's Miles Francis. Miles, how are you doing, sir?
Dude, better now. Thank you for that intro. That was very, very sweet. Yes. I love you, man, so I'm excited to do this with you. I love podcasting with you in general and hanging out. And the fact that I legitimately almost wore that shirt and remembered that you also own it and was like, I just have a feeling. I can't do it tonight.
I totally wore the Simpsons shirt in honor of Miles.
Thank you.
One of Miles' biggest bona fides, if you will, is his podcast, The Best Darn Diddly, which has 7 billion episodes at this point. Been going since 2016.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to get into talking about it, but if you're not checking it out, you need to go listen to it now. Best Darn Diddly every other week, and then Best Darn Everything the week after. So a little bit mixed.
We just make it up as we go, to be honest. There's no real schedule, but we put something out every week.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. All right, let's talk about the beginning. Where are you from?
Oh, dude, I'm originally from Huntington Beach, California, but I, barely live there. But I do think it, hyperimposed on my personality growing up just because I moved a lot, and I always knew I was from California. So I think that's why you get a lot of the dude attitude from me all the time that you guys call me out for. But my dad both my parents are actually military, and then my dad immediately went into the railroad, the Santa Fe Railroad, and then because they merged with another railroad, we moved all over the place. And I've been in North Texas in the DFW area since middle school, basically.
All right, right on. So you showed up here about, 10 years old, 11 years old?
Yeah, almost. I think maybe between 11 and 12, if I remember right.
Very cool. When you were going through puberty.
Dude, super awkward time to come meet a bunch of people, for sure.
I'm Miles. Oh!
Also, only child, so no frame of reference for what's normal to this day, because we're friends, so I don't have anybody in my life to guide me.
Direct you in any way that would be in a normal way. So you show up here. Were you into comedy before you get here, or is that part of the story? Were you entertaining kids when you were meeting them at first, or how do you kind of get into it?
Man, to some aspect, I've always known that I was at least somewhat funny, and I've always enjoyed getting that spotlight, and that was one of the only ways I could get that spotlight when I was younger. But I've loved stand-up comedy and comedy in general since I was a little kid. Honestly, I probably started listening to comedy younger than I should have, because my first comedy album that I ever heard was Chris Rock, Born Suspect. And I was probably 7, maybe 8 when I listened to that, dude. They're talking about the mayor of DC doing crack. I didn't know what DC was. I didn't know what a mayor was, and I didn't know what crack was. But I knew that I was laughing because Chris Rock was inherently funny. So I've always been a fan of comedy, but it's something that happened on the podcast that was really cool that inspired me to finally try it. Because I was always a little bit, I wanted the attention, but then I'd get kind of shy and awkward about it, and I didn't know how to deal with that. And it was actually a Simpsons writer I had on the podcast who told me about her experience doing improv comedy that basically just spoke to me in a way where as soon as I got done with that interview that day, that was probably in 2017-ish, maybe 2018. Basically, the moment I got off that interview with her, I was on Google looking up where I could do improv comedy because she just talked about how meaningful it was. And that was really the step I needed to take, because doing improv gave me the confidence to fail on stage, because I'm sorry, y'all, but that's basically what most improv comedy is.
Yeah.
But once you get comfortable failing on stage, dude, stand-up is actually really easy. This is not that hard of a job.
Yeah, I never thought about that. That's unique to think of it that way, because you're right, because in improv comedy, you'll say something you think is hysterical or in the moment, and it doesn't land. And it's just okay, we're moving on. It's the next thing. So whatever. So
with
improv, you have to listen.
You have to listen so much more. I mean, you still have to listen with stand-up, of course. I mean, you have to pay attention to what's happening in the room, or what's going on around you in general. But yeah, in improv, it's definitely more of a almost like a safety net, because you don't have to generate your own ideas on stage or draw from your own ideas on stage. The whole concept is try to draw off of the people around you. So it also means that like when you succeed, it's cool, but not as cool with stand up. But also when you fail, it's easier because you got like 7 people with you. It's like, oh, we're still friends. It's fine.
Yeah, it worked out.
When you're on stand up, of course, you're by yourself.
Oh, and you take it so personally.
Yeah. I always tell people though, it's like the highs and lows because I the analogy I use. You might have to bleep this. I don't know. The analogy I use is like doing improv comedy is like smoking drugs, but like doing stand up comedy is mainlining that stuff. It's just so much better and worse at the same time.
Yes, the highs are amazing, but the lows are devastating. Yeah, but that's a great analogy. So before 2017, you weren't doing any stand-up or anything?
No, the first performance at all that I really recall doing, I did sales. Honestly, I was a jewelry salesman for a long time, and the truth of that is that was just me acting. That was just me putting on a persona because I thought the entire time I'm in the jewelry industry, I'm like, wow, these people pay a lot of money for shiny rocks. I don't get it, but thanks for your money. So I guess like to some extent, being a salesperson is an aspect of you got to be able to create that persona and that way to interact with people. But no, I didn't do anything until I started doing a podcast. Real random, dude. I went to a wrestling event. I went to a WWE show at the American Airlines Center, and I sitting at the train station after the show. I went by myself, and I'm just riding the train home. And there's just this other dude sitting there, and we started talking, and he happened to run a podcast, and he invited me to come be a guest on it. It was called Lucha of the Hidden Temple. It was a wrestling podcast. It's now long defunct, but this was back in like 2016-ish. He ran this Lucha of the Hidden Temple, which was, again, a Lucha Underground review show, and he invited me. He's like, you watch wrestling? I'm like, love wrestling. You watch Lucha Underground? Love Lucha Underground. So we just chatted about it, and that was actually my introduction to podcasting. And through that experience, I'm like, you know what? I could do this. And it just so happened I was friends with somebody on Twitter who was a podcast, the producer. Like they would be the people who would like set it up and whatnot. And he was like, I want to start branching out from doing just wrestling shows to I want to do like cartoon shows or sitcoms. And I had grown up on The Simpsons, and my best friend, Richie Tressler, the whiz kid, if you will, who's my co-host on the podcast.
What's up, Richie?
What's up, Rich? Him and I had constantly, throughout being roommates and friends throughout the years, we always were the type of people to do the Simpsons quotes at each other constantly, or the Simpsons references. And you speak the language. You know how it is with Simpsons fans. There's just certain things that always get talked about. And long story short, we're like, you know what? We could do a podcast, and the real easy structure is to just go episode by episode, which I don't think anybody had ever done until they did those FX marathons that they used to run occasionally. But that's a tall order because there's now like 700-ish episodes of The Simpsons.
But aren't you almost halfway through?
Well, no, because they're gaining on, like we're catching up slowly, but like ultimately they're still making episodes. So I mean, we're getting closer to halfway there, but we're at the tail end of season 13 right now. Wow. So we've gone through 12 full seasons and most of 13. Along the way, we've had, like, I tried to count the other day, and I think we've had, like, 11 different Simpsons writers on the show. I hate to name names because there's a lot of them.
Motorcycle, too, was on the show.
I didn't hear that through the headphones.
Well, I mean, you had showrunners, too, haven't you?
Yeah, we've had some really big guys. Honestly, the one I'll say right now is Al Jean, who still currently is the showrunner of The Simpsons and just, like, a living encyclopedia of The Simpsons. But probably because of the story I told you, the one that's most meaningful to me will always be Carolyn Omine, because without that conversation where she so passionately talked about how improv set her life on course to what she wanted it to be, and in some degree, I mean, I'm nowhere near as successful as her, and I'm nowhere even close, but I hope to be one day. I hope to be able to afford a motorcycle. That's what I'm hoping to get out of comedy, is I want to go buy that guy's motorcycle. One, so I can ride it, and two, so it doesn't make noise during this. That's the new goal. Thanks, improv.
I'm sitting there going, I'll edit around it, and then you just threw it in there. I was like, all right, let's go. This is going to be great.
Dude, I'll say that's another thing I'm going to talk about improv, which there's like a war. I'm sure you're aware of it. Like stand-up comics always make fun of improv comics, and improv comics think stand-up comics are assholes. They're not necessarily wrong.
Right.
And neither are the stand-ups. They're both equally, like, correct, but it's this weird divide. And I will say that I think both sides could easily learn some lessons from the other, essentially, because there's so much about improv that helps me when I'm on stage doing stand-up, which I far prefer. But sometimes you fall back on those old instincts of improv, and it's really makes these wonderful moments that you can never, purposely recreate. But there's a famous quote, I can't remember who said it. I'm going to go with Conan O'Brien or possibly Stephen Colbert. It's somebody on that level for sure. And basically, the gist of it is that everybody's always trying to create these perfect moments, but the mistakes are where the gold happens. Yeah. And like when something goes wrong and you address it and you find the funny in it, like for instance, a motorcycle douche like driving through your podcast, like that's
right through the showroom. He was on stage for a second. It was ridiculous.
It's like that dude in Rocky Horror Picture Show. I think it's Meatloaf or whatever who comes out. Yeah, that's what we're dealing with here at the Addison Improv today.
I mean, you roll with it though. I love that. Like
gotta
you said,
go with it, man.
I've never heard anyone say that either. I love that the mistakes are wonderful. You know what I mean? And so you must at the same time. I've seen you on stage at a
up all the time. Oop, there I
go. No. We were at an open mic and no one was there, and you're like, I'm just gonna ramble about Batman, The Dark Knight Returns, or The Dark Knight Rises for 5 minutes, and then you did, and I was just like, what is he doing? He's just, I mean, I don't disagree with the man, but you were just like, I'm here, and I'm gonna use the stage time to just have some fun and do that. But
I think it stretches. When I do that, I think I'm just trying to stretch because, there's always room to improve the jokes that I do have. But those mistakes that can happen, like when you decide to go on a rant about why one of the Batman films is worse than the others, that you can create, these opportunities for something organic to happen. And sometimes that's where the good stuff comes from.
Yeah, it's awesome. Dude, your philosophies are blowing my mind. I love it.
I wish I could apply them better. I'm not successful.
No. Well, you are successful. You have a show coming up. You work.
I do.
You have multiple shows coming up.
Dude, I'm being very cruel to myself, self-deprecating right now. I've been very fortunate in comedy. I've literally, dude, I'm coming off a week this week that I've had a show every single night this week. That's and awesome. I've got 2 on Saturday, and I'm stoked about it. But the big news, by far, the one that I'm most excited about because they put my picture bigger on the poster, I'll be real, is the November 30th show, the showcase that we've got right here. It's going to be awesome. I get to do all of my material, which is always really, really fun. I get, to really stretch myself on those longer sets, which is comics. I mean, sometimes we're lucky to get 6 or 7 minutes if we're really grinding out there. So, to be able to do 25 is going to be fantastic.
Hell yeah, dude.
Enjoying this episode? Go check out Geekster, a dating and friends app for geeks that focuses on common interests as a way to make meaningful connections. Download today on the App Store or click the link in the description to find out more. Geekster, this is what happens when nerds collide. Geekster, available on iOS and Android.
Well, let's back up a little bit. I want to know what it was like the first time you went to an open mic. What was that experience like? Were you scared? Did you drink? You don't really drink that much, do you? So
I don't drink a lot. I definitely have I usually drink a well drink or two while I'm at an open mic, partially because I do enjoy casually drinking, and also part of the whole open mic concept is they're trying to drive business.
Yes.
So if I'm in a position where I'm able to buy a drink, I will, just to, keep that kind of circle going. My first open mic was weird. It's kind of cheating almost because I can say a competing place that doesn't exist anymore. It was Dallas Comedy House was where they're closed down now. It's fine, improv. Don't worry about it. They're no longer going to hurt you. But yeah, so it was at Dallas Comedy House where I'd done all of these improv classes and performed on the house improv teams, and the place is getting shut down, and we all know it's coming, and it's very emotional for the people that were there at that time because it's absolutely and not even that closed of a secret. It's pretty open that Dallas Comedy House did not have a comedy club. They had a cult. They had a cult of improv people who bonded in this weird way, and I was at a place in my life where that was useful for me. I needed that, so I bonded with this strange family of weirdos that played pretend on stage, and when it was closing, it was becoming this pretty big deal, essentially. And I had told one of the people that owned it, I was like, man, I've always really wanted to do stand-up comedy, which is true. I never felt confident that I'd be able to do it. I just was scared. And also, it's literally the one thing I ever actually really wanted to do, which makes it even more terrifying if it didn't go well. Right. I'd be like, man, the one thing I thought I could be really good at, and I suck. And I do suck sometimes, don't get me wrong. I suck a lot, but sometimes I'm decent, and that's good enough. But yeah, so long story short, Kyle Austin was the dude that He literally, after an open mic, at the very tail end of an open mic, it's like the last one they're ever going to have. He goes up to the host and he's like, hey man, and this is the owner's brother, so like he's got some pull, but goes up to the person running the mic and is like, hey man, can I get somebody else bumped on the list? And he's going to try to get me up on the stage. Host straight up tells him no. He's like, nope, I'm already over time. I'm putting this stuff away. So he's like, all right, I'm not going to argue with him. And Kyle's like, just come have a drink with me at the bar. And we go out to the bar and we collect a couple of people who had like expressed the same desire. He waits for the host to leave. And then he goes in and he just sets the whole thing back up again.
No.
100%. There was about 6 of us that night, and we all did an open mic for each other.
Oh,
and like it
so
was
cool.
a super improv thing because it's like no matter what, guys, we're gonna clap for each other and laugh and total yes-anding each other in a stand-up set. But even with that kind of like I don't know, that's like a methadone hit, I guess. Like it didn't really count, but like it got the seed planted.
Yeah.
That was, I don't remember what night of the week I was. I think that was Thursday, which meant I had to wait all the way to like Sunday or Monday to do it again. But the very first real mic I hit was actually at a chocolate shop / wine bar in Uptown. Way different experience because I went in thinking that, you know, it was a 7-minute set and I'm thinking, no problem, I'm going to be able to cover that. I was out of material in 3, maybe. But I was very proud of myself because I didn't get off. This is probably looking back. I was probably being a total asshole. All the like experienced comics were probably like, "Oh my god, this guy." But I did fill my time. I didn't like run off. Like I didn't like run out of material and be like, "Okay, thanks, bye." I just kept talking to people and kept trying to find things that were funny, and some of it was, and some of it wasn't. But I have it. I still have it recorded to this day.
That's freaking awesome. Yeah. That's so awesome that you didn't have that fear of being like, and the improv probably helped that too, where you're like, well, I'll go here and go there, and what I'm thinking, and then we'll kind of go. Do you do a lot of crowd work? I've never seen a lot of it.
So I don't actively seek out crowd work. I'm not somebody that is trying to create crowd work, but I'm also not going to steer away from it, assuming I'm in the correct role. Because you're well aware, if I'm hosting a show, they don't want hosts to interact with people as much as possible. They just want you to stick to your material and leave that on the table for your headliner, or, you know, features or whatever. But I don't seek it out, but if I'm at a bar show, like last night, dude, I did a show last night in a military town at a bar literally called Foo Bar. So it's like way down like near Austin. And it was just this wild redneck crowd, and some things happened where like, you know, people would talk to me from the crowd, and I'm not going to ignore that. I'm going to absolutely have if somebody feels so strongly that what they have to say in the front row is important enough to interrupt and say out loud in the bar, then we should absolutely discuss it and decide if it is or isn't, you know. Maybe there's going to be some gold in those mistakes, and maybe it'll just be like, all right, I shouldn't have talked to you. Moving on.
I made a mistake.
Yes, I chose poorly.
That's so awesome. So hosting the first time, when you got the gig, how far into... You've been doing this for what, 5 years then?
No, man. I've only been doing this, it'll be 4 years in March.
So 4 years you've been doing this. Mm-hmm. When was you got to your first hosting gig? About a year in? 2 years?
Pretty early, actually. I got into hosting pretty quick, and that's largely just because, again, I was very comfortable with a lot of the things, like the improv background and the sales background both make me very comfortable in a position where I have to be the face of something to present something. And being a host is usually, again, this is going to very much depend on the venue and whatnot, but being a host is often a completely different skill set than being a comic. Just be in that you have to be moderately funny, but legitimately a lot of places don't really care that you're the funniest person in the room, and they don't expect you to be because they've got other comics in those spots. They just want you to be able to get the names of the people right, get the announcements, get the sponsors, get the bar specials, whatever it is. They want you to be likable and presentable. They don't want you to necessarily be the most hilarious person. And that's a different skill set that I brought with me from doing other things in my life, like being a jewelry salesman or doing improv comedy or hosting trivia nights, which is another gig I do sometimes, things of that nature.
So how about featuring? What was that like?
Featuring was exciting. Like, that's kind of where I'm at right now. Like, for the most part, like I would say, you know, there's this weird stepping stone pattern, but the show that I'm headlining on the 30th is what's considered a showcase show, and that's definitely a step down, maybe even 2, from like a weekend show where you'd be headlining. That's where you have your big name draws, of course. I want to make it very clear. I'm saying that out loud for the audience. I'm not trying to explain how a comedy club works to a person that works here.
Hey, it's fine.
Let me mansplain the situation to you real quick.
I'm sitting here rolling my eyes. I know, Miles. I know. I've been here for a while. Jeez.
But
no,
like,
I love it.
I just feel like that needed to get said because I don't want to I'm a headliner. Like that's very different. But I do consider myself to be at a level where I'm a very, very strong host and a very capable feature, and I really like doing both. Being a feature is straight up more fun because you just get to come in and play. You don't have to have anything going on in the back of your mind. You're not worried about, how you pronounce the headliner's name if you forgot or if he had credits that, you're supposed to say or whatever. You just get to come out and be funny and play with the crowd a little bit and have a good time. So being a feature is incredible. First time I got to feature is for someone who just left us here in the DFW scene, Dan Danzy. Wishing him best of luck up in Pennsylvania.
Dan. Have fun with the snow.
He's going to freeze, dude. he's not meant for cold weather. I don't know what he was thinking.
He's so tiny.
He's going to have to eat so much more. But he was the first person I was able to feature for during one of his headlining weekends, and it was a super, super great experience. Really fun. At that time, I was very much stretching to fill that time slot, but I've gotten, better and more material since then. So it's getting to a point where it's just becoming very fun and it's not a stressful event anymore. It's just a fun time.
How would you describe your style of comedy? It is observational, but it's very... the best way to put it, like your stage presence is, I think, one of the best things about you is you bring this friendliness to the stage. Like you could be anyone's best friend in the room. You know what I mean? And you bring like this energy that's just super relaxed, super calm. And then you tell these hilarious jokes. How would you describe your stage presence and where that comes from?
I'm just really high the whole time. I'm not actually that chill. I'm just stoned as fuck. Excuse me.
How did I get on the stage,
man? This is where I park my car. No, dude. Honestly, I'm not too far off from. I'm a little louder and I'm a little bit more bold and I'm a little bit more focused on me than I tend to be in real life on stage. But those are all qualities of myself. I'm a very friendly, outgoing person. I told you I met a dude at a train stop and ended up on his podcast.
Yeah,
that's how
awesome.
This whole thing started.
Yeah.
I mean, I like to talk to strangers. I know you're not technically supposed to do that, but I find that to be a pretty interesting way to learn some cool stuff and find some cool stuff. But as far as humor type goes, I agree. Observational for sure. A lot of self-deprecation. I grew up with a lot of, I still struggle with things like body image issues. Had an eating disorder when I was younger. I grew up super fat, got bullied. These are all things I talk about on stage, and they're all 100% true. Some of them are, of course, very exaggerated, and some of them just take a weird turn because I got bored and thought it'd be more interesting this way. But everything I talk about on stage comes from some degree of truth about myself and some experience that I've had with something along the way.
So back to the podcast. How do you get people from the show on? Like, and I know the answer already, but how do you do it?
Just get so lucky, dude. Is the real answer. To some degree, it's pestering. I was always very careful to not overdo that, but it's all through Twitter. And I know Twitter is a changing landscape right now. I'll be honest, I know Elon Musk bought it. I don't really know what that means or why it's changing or like why people seem to think I should delete it and whatnot. But and I don't use it nearly. Do we have dishes being done?
The ghost, man. It's the ghost of the improv, bro. He's just chucking stuff.
This podcast is so bad they're going to start throwing plates at us from a motorcycle.
They found tomatoes somehow and just started chucking them. So pestering, you said. So
it's old Twitter is what it is. I was on Twitter. This would have been, like I said, 2016-ish. Well, still am, but that would have been the time that I was mostly making these contacts. And I would reach out. I would interact on Simpsons Twitter, just hashtag Simpsons or The Simpsons, or get on while The Simpsons was airing live on a Sunday, and people are just chatting about it, and I just kind of interact. And sometimes the voice actors, sometimes the writers, sometimes various producers or people that are involved in the show are actively in those conversations, and I was able to strike up a conversation. The first one, and again, probably the most meaningful person I ever got the agreement to come on the show was Carolyn Omine, but she made me work for it, dude. Carolyn played hard to get because, and I love Carolyn to death. She's like the sweetest person and so fun to talk to. But she straight up told me, and good for her for being just honest about it. She's like, I would love to do this. I won't be available till at least, I think she said November. At the time.
Wow.
It was a long time out. And I was like, cool, Carolyn, I'm going to touch base with you occasionally, but I won't bother you until whatever date you said. And that's exactly what I did on certain dates, like a big Simpsons episode come out or something. I'd be like, hey, congratulations on this episode, and tell her if I enjoyed it or what I did or didn't like about it, and being like, I'm looking forward to our conversation in a few months. And then I did that a few times along the way. And then that date came along and I reached out. I'm like, hey, you still down to do the show? And she's like, yep, but I got busy again. It's not going to be for another month. And this went on for a while, man. This went on for a while, and we just kept that relationship, that Twitter conversation going. And I was always, extremely respectful of her time and her just being gracious enough to even offer to come on the show. But eventually, it happened, and she came on. We talked for literally like almost 3 hours.
Wow.
And something I'm really proud of, actually, is that not only have I had Simpsons writers on, I've had multiple Simpsons writers on more than once, meaning that they had a good enough time the first time they agreed to come do it again. And that's always been my goal from the start of the show. Whenever I told Richie the first time we were getting a guest on, I'm like, I don't really feel like we need to be the world's best interviewers. Like, Ducky Wenzel's already going to have that title.
Thank you.
But I do think that we need to just create this fun environment, this show concept where like they're going to be treated as like a friend who also loves The Simpsons, because all the Simpsons writers are Simpsons nerds. Like 100%. So before Carolyn ever came on, I think I ended up having like 2 different writers, but I hate that I'm going to miss somebody. And they've all, like, all the conversations I've had with these guys have been so incredible. But like Mike Price has been on multiple times. Mike Reese has been on multiple times. Carolyn Omina has been on multiple times. Then Al Jean was on twice. Yeah, just a lot of really cool people. And I also should shout out, he's an author actually, and he's not on social at all, so you have to work to find him. But his name is Matthew Klickstein. And I met him because I read his book, which was an oral history on Nickelodeon, the kids' television show from like the 80s and 90s. The book blew me away, and I just I actually wrote him a review on Amazon, and he reached out to me and thanked me, and then we started a correspondence. I ended up having him on my Simpsons show because he's a big Simpsons fan, and he ends up being the co-author of Mike Reese's book, Springfield Confidential.
Oh, wow.
So whenever he got that job, he put our podcast on the media list, and we got like early access books, and we got access to Mike's schedule to come and promote the show, promote the book on the show. And man, like, Matthew is such a cool dude. He's made movies. He made a documentary about Mark Summers called On Your Mark. Super cool, super fun watch.
Awesome.
And he currently, like, the thing that I just got an early release copy of it, actually. It's like a book just in time for Hanukkah, and it's like 101 things about Jewish culture, like a Jewish encyclopedia. Even features Krusty the Clown as a celebrity Jewish person.
That's awesome, dude.
So yeah, he's put me in touch with a lot of the Simpsons people.
Very cool. Very cool. Hey, everyone, it's just Duck jumping in here real quick to say thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. If you're enjoying it, head over to your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, or iTunes, and give We Are Podcast Network a like. And if you get a chance, head over to our social media. All links can be found in the description. You can find us at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at /We Are Podcast. And with that, back to the podcast. All right, let's switch gears. I want to talk about something I saw recently. No longer about you, Miles. It's about this thing I saw.
I don't like this guy.
So I went to see the Evil Dead musical, and Miles definitely wasn't in it. No, it was wonderful. Miles was in the play. We do a podcast together called Camp/Horrorcast. So if you guys want to check it out, that's totally cool. But Miles brought so much energy to that cast whenever he joined into it, and it's been awesome. And so, I feel like you've been there since the beginning. But you bring like this like positivity, and like you're always quick to crack a joke and tag something, so it's so cool. But
I love that podcast, man. Like I feel the same way. Like in terms of like I feel like just more fulfilled since I joined the podcast. Like I've always loved horror movies, and it's so good to find people, even when we disagree. Mm-hmm. Just the fact that we can have such a deep conversation about these silly, arguably very silly films. But man, they're fun.
So we went to see the play. It was me, Jay, Will, and
Dan Danzy.
Dan Danzy, that's right. And wow, what a fun time. And somebody was the show stealer. I don't know who this guy was. He was up there. I saw his dick. I'm not even joking. When you rushed out with your pants down, I was like, whoa, there it is. No, it
I love community theater.
It was so cool, dude. You were definitely, you stole the show.
Thank you.
The whole thing. What was that experience like? Have you been in other plays, or is this the first one you've ever done?
No, dude, not at all. First of all, the whole thing was incredible. Like from the getting to be like very close with the rest of the cast and like this kind of like group friendship that we've developed. It's really, really fun to be a part of something like that. That's something that kind of exists in comedy, but not to this degree. And to answer your question though, no, I've never been involved in theater, like not since I was in like second grade or something when everybody has to be. Honestly, I was not confident enough in high school just to do the things that I wanted to do. I did the things that I felt like I was supposed to do. So, things like play football when I hated it, and just being involved in the stuff.
Bang chicks, you know how it is. I was this total bro.
Oh, this is awful. Why am I doing? No, I definitely wanted to be doing that, but wasn't able to for a while. It's fine. We got there eventually. But honestly, like in hindsight, looking back, I would have been a much happier youth if I had gotten involved in theater younger. And I think that would have also pushed me to be more comfortable in things like stand-up comedy from an early age. So I got there eventually, and for the most part, I'm happy because I got to have a lot of life experience that I feel like I'm able to draw from now that I'm entering this world versus when I was a kid. What am I going to talk about that's interesting to anybody? But long story short, I was actually kind of feeling in a rut doing stand-up. I'm grinding every night, and I still am, and I still love it. Don't get me wrong. It's never, not that I didn't love it. It's that I felt like I was getting stagnant on stage. So it just so happens that I see a ad for an audition for Evil Dead the Musical, which I didn't even know was a thing. I love Evil Dead.
Yeah.
Had no idea that they made a play about it, let alone a musical. Immediately, I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And if I just go to an audition and I sing in front of people, that's going to feel uncomfortable, and that's going to feel weird, and that's going to feel really good. Because sometimes it's good to feel uncomfortable on stage. Like, it'll just make you go to different places or whatever. Just get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's something I'm always striving to do on stage. So my thought is I'm going to go audition for this part, and I'm not going to get it. I'm just going to have to sing in front of people, and it's going to be weird and fun or whatever. Not only do I audition for a pretty small part, but when I auditioned for it, they're like, no, we don't see you as this person. We see you as Scotty, who is like Ash's best friend, like one of the bigger characters in the show, has a much larger part, has like dance numbers and singing and whatnot. And they end up casting me and putting me in every show as this character who is so much fun to play. Like I had an absolute blast, but it definitely, like, I guess I kind of put that out in the world that I wanted to challenge myself and make myself uncomfortable. And boy, oh boy, did I get my wish, because suddenly I'm doing rehearsals multiple times a week. I actually had to take like 3 weeks off from doing stand-up comedy. I barely did. I think I snuck in one open mic in that time just because between rehearsals and show dates and just trying to, practice and get good enough to do this. It took up a lot of time, but it was so much fun. I had a lot more fun just being funny in the first act, where it's more acting. My favorite part by far, I got to do a duet with Ash called, I'm going to have to censor it, but the title is What the F Was That? It's my favorite part of the show by far. We do a song and dance together. It's kind of based on the tango. It was really cool. Then I lead, essentially at the end of the show, I was leading what would be compared to the Time Warp from like Rocky Horror Picture Show, like the big fun dance number with everybody singing and dancing in line. And I was literally the front and center, which was so funny because on the day that we first started doing that run through for the choreography for that, my music director had us all like close our eyes, and then we rated ourselves a 1 through 5 in dance ability, and I rated myself a 0. And then we opened our eyes. He's like, well, you rated yourself a 0, but it doesn't matter because you're front and center on this dance number. Everyone else, I'll put you according to your ranking. No. But it was great. Like it got to a point where I was actually having a good time. I never felt comfortable dancing like that, but through practice and great choreography and great direction from our music director and things like that, it really, yeah.
Dude, it's shocking to hear that because you killed it so much in the show. And like I didn't even think about that because like you dance awesome. So you're a great dancer. But I never, not once did I think about it. My favorite thing though was when you died and you had whatever was in your hands. I guess it was tissue paper.
So it's supposed to be my guts, but it was a great combination of glycerin, shredded paper towels, and just mostly water and red food coloring.
Yeah, dude. And you chucked it at the audience.
Yeah, multiple times.
And I couldn't help but to feel you were chucking it at us specifically.
Nope, you just happened to be in the splash zone. That had nothing to do with me.
What a fun time, though. In the splash zone, dude. Oh, that's so great. Jay was just like, they're targeting me. They're targeting me. I'm like, bro, they can't see you.
Oh, I could see you. I knew exactly where you were. Honestly, there was one on the last show. I had some friends that sat they weren't in the splash zone at all. They weren't anywhere near where we tarped it off. They were literally in like the corner side stage, but I knew they were there. So on one of the scenes where I pop up multiple times and keep dying and flinging guts, I literally pop up, turn over my shoulder, and like fling it straight back there. Because I'm like, it's the last show. What are they going to do? Fire me?
That's freaking awesome. All right, back to comedy. I'm not good at segues. What is the weirdest show you've ever been at? Like the one that just went off the rails or just crazy or had an experience with an audience member?
That's almost impossible just because they're all so weird. But there's definitely one that stands out at the now defunct Hat Tricks, where I hosted an open mic for a long time, pre-pandemic, excuse me. We had a long-running open mic out there, and we decided to start booking shows. But the owner of that bar was just a weird dude. And I'll even say this. Every person who ever hosted that mic, when they passed it on to the next person, they always said the same thing. This is an incredible mic. The only thing that sucks about it is having to deal with the owner. Which that place is shut down now, so it doesn't matter. We can talk crap about him. But
but if they were still open, best guy ever.
No, honestly, you would never hear that come out of my mouth. Never once in my life. But this show in particular, he wanted to book a hypnotist. And he wanted us to open the show for this hypnotist. And he wanted me to book the comics and put it together. But he had like almost no, he was paying with drink tickets, which is very common in these things, but it makes it hard to get anybody of any talent. But I did put together a talented lineup. Some really, honestly, I got some people out on there that like are now like recording albums and stuff. So looking back, it's actually pretty dope. Honestly, I'll even shout her out. Ruth Banks was on that show. Ruth. And Ruth Banks' album Screwed comes out, I think, on like December 12th, which you should totally go and download because Ruth is great and she's really funny. And she hosted here this last weekend. Yeah. Anyway, I plug my friends because I hope they plug me one day. That's all that is.
So you got Ruth on the show.
I had a lineup of younger, newer comics at the time, but they basically say anything goes, it's fine. So I booked these comics who are nervous about filling their time because they're all doing longer than they ever had in the past, and but they can say anything they want. And this owner comes up to us literally right before we're about to walk on stage, and he's like, "Hey, I don't know what any of you guys are planning to say, but none of you better say anything messed up that's going to have these people walking out of here." And like some of these comics are like deer in headlights, just like, what am I supposed to do? All my material's about my dick. Like, it was bad. And then, like, he just did weird stuff. Like, it's a hypnotist, so of course it's going to be a weird crowd. But the owner at one point, like, is just, like, up on stage standing behind the comics watching, which was super awkward. It was a weird time to be alive in comedy.
So the show didn't go well? Or
I mean, people got hypnotized. Yeah, they got what they were advertised for. It was interesting.
Fair enough. All right. What advice do you have for people starting out? Like, we've talked, like, because I'm starting out. But what advice would you give somebody?
My advice would be to look at myself and be like, "Oh wow, his life's a mess. Don't take advice from this guy."
No, you've got great advice, dude. We went open micing, and in the car, you told me a bunch of different stuff that totally resonated with where I was. You were like, maybe don't do this, possibly do this instead. You know what I mean? You were giving me great advice, so I will follow you. You tell me where we will go.
This is terrifying. I feel like I'm running like the least successful cult in the history of cults.
It's just me and you, Miles. Let's do this.
Let's drink the monster, dude.
All right. The Kool-Aid, baby.
There we go. It was actually not Kool-Aid. It was, oh my God, what was it called?
Powerade.
No, it wasn't. It's the cheap one. Rite Aid, maybe. I think it was
Rite Aid.
No, something not Kool-Aid. It was off-brand Kool-Aid. Just to be very clear for the deaths that occurred, that's the important part that we need to focus on.
What they last drank, we do know.
Advice I would give legitimately is the easiest one is just to be yourself, which is so cliche, but like you just said, I told you not to say things or to say things. I probably, and I hope if I didn't, I should have caveated that, like, if you want to, you should say whatever you want. You ultimately have the stage time and the microphone. You have freedom of speech and you have the ability to speak your mind. So say what you want to, but just be aware that all those things can be true, and there can also be consequences for your words. So depending on what you're going to choose to say, it's going to turn people's opinions of you one way or the other. So you should be cognitive of that. But outside of that very cliche advice, I think the best thing that I have ever learned from comedy is that, and this is actually true for all performance arts. This goes to Evil Dead. There's times when I messed up where as long as you ring true to this concept, if you are in any performance arts, it doesn't really matter how well you're doing. It matters how much fun you're having. Because to some degree, of course, you need to be moderately funny to be a comedian, and you need to be moderately good at acting to be in a play, and you need to be a moderately good singer to, perform a song. But ultimately, if you are having fun, the audience is going to want to have that fun with you. They're going to recognize, like, oh man, this dude's having the time of his life. I want to be at the party with him. That's going to win people over far more than writing the most perfect joke and nailing the execution on it every single time. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's people that do that and they're incredible and they're hilarious and that works for them and I'm happy for them. But I am never going to write the smartest joke of the world and say it perfectly because I'm going to stutter or I'm going to slip up or I'm going to bite my tongue or whatever. But I will be having a great time if you give me that microphone and give me a crowd of people to talk to.
Absolutely, dude. You're so much fun to watch on stage.
Thank you, man.
You really are. You have, like I said, you bring people in. Like the second you get on stage, you make it your space, and then you bring people in. That is an incredible talent to have. A lot of comedians draw that barrier. They like the lights. They like the bubble that's up here. But you just seem like to be talking to, like I said, one of your best friends or something like that. So it's really fun to watch.
I like it when people invite me to their table so I can munch on their 2-item minimum or get a drink out of the situation.
Can I get some of those nachos?
Yeah, just move the lights down to table 3, please.
We're good. What's your writing process like? How do you do it?
I should write more, which is always a thing. The truth is, it's things that I experience largely. I mean, they either legitimately happen the way that they are, or I exaggerate them slightly and realize how funny they can be. This is a weird confession, but I do a lot of my actual writing in a bathtub.
Yeah.
Because I am super ADHD and I love taking hot baths. It's one of my favorite things. But it's almost like a sensory deprivation thing for me because I'll have my ears under the water and I'll be in a hot bath of water, and it just allows me to focus my thoughts, and I have my phone so I can translate these concepts or these observations that I've made that I usually will just write down a few words about while I'm going through my day, and I can go through those lists and I can kind of think to myself what could be funny about this, or start trying to actually write it out. But I'm definitely somebody that figures it out a lot on stage. I don't think any of my jokes are ever perfectly crafted whenever I write them. I think that they're largely a decent joke that needs some trimming and some fat cutting for certain, and I usually do that while I'm on stage at an open mic. I'm trying to see if I have a list of words that would be a good example for this.
Motorcycle.
Well, if something, yeah, for sure, we can definitely add that now. But I literally will just like write these weird. Okay, here I'll. This is the most recent list that I made that have no joke written yet, but might one day if if I ever make it to be on like one of these comedians on your wall, maybe we'll have one of these jokes. But musical theater, polyamory, divorce, new girlfriend, love on ecstasy, sleepovers, the fart barrier, and the inner circle. None of those are anything, but they all could be.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you set up like a giant bullet point and you go, this is where we're going to begin. And then you work it out. And then you, like you said, you work it out on stage for the most part. So, and you're on stage all the time. Like you are putting in the work to do so. Where do you see yourself in the next 5 years? Where do you want to be with this?
Man, that's a great question. In 5 years, I should probably be somebody who's thinking more about the next 5 years. That's going to be my first step. Mm-hmm. I don't fully know. I think I want to go try it in New York.
Yeah.
That's been in the back of my mind to some degree, partially just because I am in a place where I kind of want to change the scenery and whatnot. But the truth is, Dallas is a great place to do comedy.
Yeah.
It really is. Like, I don't know the actual statistics, but I believe that for the most part, LA and New York are always going to be number one and number two. Like they are too far ahead to be caught up on. Right. But I think you can make a strong argument that number 3 is not defined. Like there is a lot of cities with some great comedy happening that could be listed as that third. It could be Chicago, for instance. It could be Atlanta. People have made the argument for Austin. I think for sure, no doubt, Dallas is on that list of cities that is a great place. You're right. I am on stage a lot because if I'm not getting booked on a show, there's an open mic here 6 days a week.
Yeah, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. Making me think I need to go back out there.
You should.
I think we've talked about everything that I usually talk about on this, and it's been It's been awesome, dude.
No, man, this has been a great conversation. I really love talking with you all the time. We get to talk about horror movies on Mondays, which is always a good time, and it's super fun just to get to talk about myself because I enjoy that too.
My favorite subject, let you know. No, dude, I appreciate you being here. The show is going to be November 30th at 7:30 here at the Addison Improv. Everyone, get your tickets now. Come out and see Miles. It's going to be an amazing show. If you had to sell it, you have to do a drop. Look in the camera. Sell the show for the people.
It'll be like this, but better.
Perfect drop. That was awesome. I can't use that. Dude, I love you, bro. Seriously. Seriously, thank you so much for doing this. Miles Francis rocks. Everyone.
Try that again without the...
Oh, yeah. Miles Francis frickin' rocks.
Boom,
My bad. Y'all, support local comedy in any way that you can. Please support local comedy. And with that said, we'll see you on the next one. And there it is. Thank you again so much for checking out the podcast today. If you enjoyed it, head over to your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Stitcher, Podbean, and iTunes, and give We Are Podcast Network a like. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, you're going to love the other podcasts here on the We Are Podcast Network. We have We Are Bagoo, a video game podcast where we talk Atari to Steam and everything between. That's me and Dr. Ethan Eastwood breaking down all that video game lore and having such a good time. Heroes, Gyros, a Dungeons and Distractions side quest. Me and the boys were playing some D&D. You can start that one from Season 1, Episode 1. It's a blast the whole way through. And I Hate Being Sober. Personal stories from epic people. I sit down with some of my favorite people of all time. We talk about their trials, their tribulations, and their journey this far. And finally, our new live video podcast, Camp/Horrorcast, where we're going to have a roundtable discussion about our favorite horror movies. That'll be available on Twitch and YouTube, streaming every Monday at 8 p.m. Check the links in the description to find out what movies we'll be watching. Also, check the links in the description for our social media. You can find us at Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at /We Are Podcast Network. With that said, thank you so much for checking out the podcast today. Please remember to support local comedy in any way that you can. We'll see you next time.